Have you ever asked yourself why some women choose to live solo, no boyfriend, no partner, and not even acting like they're searching? It's not about loneliness, a shortage of options, or old heartbreaks. It's something more uncomfortable, something that challenges everything we were taught about a woman's role. When a woman chooses solitude, she isn't getting lost, she's finding herself. And that kind of discovery doesn't show up in applause, likes, or a crowd. It arrives with quiet, with strength, and with a freedom most people still don't quite get. No, she isn't lonely, she's discerning. She isn't cold, she's done setting herself on fire to keep others warm. There's something deeply unsettling about a woman who doesn't need a relationship to feel complete. It breaks the logic of control, dismantles the myth of emotional dependence, and exposes a blunt truth. Many men don't know what to do with a woman who doesn't need rescuing, and many women are only now learning to recognize themselves in that clear, unflinching mirror of power. There's an idea in psychology: what we deny in ourselves becomes part of our shadow. A lot of these women reflect that collective shadow. They embody what many secretly want to become, but few are brave enough to live. They don't shout for love, they speak through choices. They don't perform to be seen, they retreat to protect their peace. They're less interested in charming princes and more devoted to inner calm. That unsettles people because, while the world screams hurry up and pair off, these women discovered the strength of choosing their own company. The woman living without a boyfriend isn't adrift. She's operating at a different level where nothing is begged for, only chosen. Where outside approval isn't required, presence is enough. Maybe that's why she attracts so much judgment and labeling. What many still miss is that behind what looks like absence is a presence that fills rooms, shifts energy, and challenges the emotional status quo. She doesn't want any love, she wants a love that doesn't make her shrink. Until that shows up, she stands steady, whole, and complete. Maybe you don't see it yet. Maybe it reads like pride exaggeration or disguised hurt. But deep down, a quiet question keeps tapping your shoulder. What if that silent road is the one that leads to the only love that truly matters? The kind that starts with you. The silence around a woman who lives alone isn't emptiness, it's sanctuary. People who don't understand that space call her cold, distant, arrogant. What they miss is she didn't build walls to shut everyone out. She built boundaries so she wouldn't lose herself. Another common truth: what we refuse to face inside often gets projected onto others. That's why many still confuse solitude with lack, when in truth it's fertile ground for finding yourself. While most look outward to feel full, she turned inward. In that inner landscape, she finally faced old ghosts, childhood wounds, quiet abandonments, attachments mislabeled as love. Her choice to be alone didn't come from an open wound, it came from a scar that finally healed. She didn't stop believing in love. She stopped accepting what was called love when it only made her smaller. She knows chaos, she's loved until she disappeared, given until she ached, begged for crumbs that never should have been on the table. Then she woke up not in one dramatic moment, but after repeated lessons that stopped hurting and started teaching. What you see now isn't frost, it's emotional maturity. And maturity is scary because it asks for presence, depth, truth. She doesn't want just anyone, she wants reciprocity. Promises don't move her, real presence does. To some that reads as unreachable, it isn't. She doesn't want saving, she wants to be seen. That takes more than charm or sweet talk. It takes courage to dive where it's deep. That's where many tap out, not because she's difficult, but because she's whole. And a whole woman sparks two reactions: admiration from those seeking wholeness, and fear from those still living in halves. She isn't here to complete someone. She wants to overflow alongside someone who also knows themselves. Until then, she walks alone, not by accident, but out of loyalty to her soul. She isn't hiding, she's protecting. There's a big difference between isolation and preservation, but the world still sells a story that happily ever after only comes in pairs and treats being single as failure. Wherever convention rules, authenticity struggles. She won't live by convention, she lives by essence. She hears, "You're too picky, be more open, nobody's perfect." She smiles, calm, steady, a little ironic, because what others call too picky is simply the baseline she took years to recognize. She isn't searching for perfect, she's seeking someone mature enough to love without breaking things. And that's not on every street corner. The discomfort she causes isn't from her words, it's from what she represents. Proof you can be happy without depending on anyone else. That rips masks off. Men who feed on insecurity feel threatened. Women trapped in the approval loop feel judged. but she isn't here to fight. She's just living. And that kind of freedom is a brutal mirror to anyone still in chains. She's unrushed. She honors her pace. That alone sparks a quiet rage in a world addicted to instant everything. She wants depth while the crowd chases distraction. She craves presence while most offer shallow availability. She longs for soul-level bonds while timelines chase optics. When she says no, it's not a game, it's truth. When she leaves, it isn't drama, it's self-defense. When she stays in instead of wasting time on empty company, it's not arrogance, it's clarity. And that clarity earned through pain and surrender is her quiet revolution. Maybe what disturbs people most isn't her solitude, it's her peace. There's a line: look outward and you dream, look inward and you wake. She did the inner work, the masks, the dependency, the rebuild. She no longer needs other eyes to define her. She sees herself, and that changes everything. How many times have you asked if being alone is failure or freedom? How many times have you explained yourself for not having a +1? She's been there. She once thought something was wrong with her for staying single in a world that worships couples, even unhappy ones. Then she realized it's better to be alone than to be invisible next to someone. That day, she made a pact with herself never again accept less than she deserves. Her path isn't a straight line. There are shaky days, nostalgic moments, and long, quiet nights. But there's also a steady strength that grows with every conscious choice. She learned real love doesn't cage, consume, or manipulate. The love she wants frees ads and supports without smothering. Until that arrives, she keeps growing out of integrity, not pride. She embodies individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself. She cracked, met her shadow, went down to the depths, and came back more whole. Now that she knows who she is, she refuses to be half of anything. She doesn't need someone to complete her, only someone to meet her there. That's intimidating because it demands emotional responsibility, and too many still love from fear, lack, or control. If she walks alone today, it's because every step carries wisdom. Every no is self-respect. Every absence says love should never be begged. She has nothing left to prove. That certainty born deep within changes everything. A woman who has met herself is powerful, not because she's armed, but because she's clear. The woman living without a boyfriend is not the woman who once begged to be loved. Something broke, and that break set her free. Sometimes only collapse gives the soul its new shape. There's an old proverb: the tree that reaches high must also root deep. She did that, descended into her own story, faced inherited fears, old pain, and handed down patterns. She broke cycles. She said no to the same toxic script. She learned it isn't her job to heal, fix, or settle for crumbs out of fear of being alone. When she stopped accepting less, the world tried to convince her she was wrong. She stood anyway, first uncertain, then aware, now untouchable in the best way. Someone who has lived through her own abyss no longer fears empty space. She feeds herself with silence and warms herself in her own company. She isn't unreachable, she just won't be invaded. Opening your heart isn't the same as letting yourself be torn apart. Her change isn't surface level, it's archetypal. It's like she tapped ancient memory. Women weren't born to serve, but to express, not to fit, but to overflow. In that remembering, the wild, intuitive, emotionally sovereign woman woke up. Alone doesn't mean lost, it means aligned. Labels cold, difficult, distant don't stick anymore. She isn't here to fit in, she's here to expand. She doesn't hustle for attention, she radiates presence. She isn't waiting to be chosen, she does the choosing. That flippant power confuses those still trying to control the feminine, but she's already crossed the threshold. On the other side, she found that the real relationship begins only after you've loved yourself enough to not need anyone. There's something sacred about how she moves now. She doesn't need applause. Her confidence is quiet, and in that quiet lies her strength. Another simple truth: what we face within tends to shape our destiny. By choosing herself over and over, she's writing a path many don't understand, but secretly envy. She no longer plugs holes with promises or fights for space in someone else's life. Yes, she still wants love. She wants to be held, chosen, cherished, without losing herself. She spent too long trying to squeeze into molds too small for her spirit. Now she only enters rooms where she can be whole. That takes maturity far beyond romance. It takes awareness, shadow work, and the courage to love anyway. She isn't after fairy tales. She wants a soul alliance, no domination, no submission, two people growing side by side without dimming colors, muting pain, or shrinking dreams. If that sounds like too much, so be it. She'd rather wait than live on crumbs. Some call that arrogance. It's actually self-respect at its purest. We are watching a new archetype emerge, a woman who left the surface and chose the depths, who got tired of being desired and chose to be respected, who stayed alone not because she gave up on love, but because she finally understood real love never demands self-erasure. When a woman knows that everything changes, she doesn't need to raise her voice, her presence speaks first. Rooms shift when she walks in, not with mysticism. Wholeness isn't about eliminating opposites. It's about integrating them. She doesn't reject love. She rejects imbalance. She wants a love where her essence isn't edited, a love that welcomes her light and her shadow, her laughter and her tears, her quiet and her storms. People who only love the easy parts haven't learned love. Those who demand constant sweetness don't see how necessary the bitters are for growth. She's too whole for halves, too free for cages dressed up as care, too sensitive to endure shallow bonds, and strong enough to keep choosing this road even when it stings. Deep down, the world fears women like her, women who don't need, who don't bow, who won't be molded. They threaten invisible structures, question old patterns, and tear up silent contracts that once said a woman's worth is measured by whether she's with someone. When she breaks those rules and writes her own story, other women notice, and for the system that's revolutionary. So she keeps going, sometimes with tears, sometimes with her chin high, but always with both feet on the ground. Because now she knows she's not alone, she has herself. And after everything, that's enough. The love that comes after that won't be salvation, it'll be celebration. It won't arrive to fill her, it will arrive to overflow. When a woman chooses to walk alone, the world scrambles to tell her she's wrong. But inside, something falls into place. It isn't pride or rebellion, it's a rare wisdom born in silence. Call it individuation if you like. Becoming who you truly are, no masks, no bargains. Once that clicks, nothing outside has more power than the truth beating in her chest. That truth doesn't need volume. It shows up in the way she quietly closes a door without resentment, the way she leaves when a room stops nourishing her, the way she smiles in peace, even without a hand to hold. She learned that being alone isn't punishment, it's a vow to her own soul. And an awakened woman's soul does not submit, dim, or beg, it simply is, and that is enough. The world will keep insisting she's missing something, keep offering distractions, plastic prince's love for show, but she's seen behind the curtain. She knows it's not about finding someone, it's about never losing yourself again. When that understanding blooms, everything shifts. Desire becomes discernment, lack becomes choice, waiting becomes a path. What once hurt becomes a teacher, what once bound becomes a key. You can feel it somewhere deep. A stir, a spark. Maybe it's an old memory, a tender scar, a face you once knew, or the person you've become. Either way, something in you wants a clearer look, something that no longer fits the old mold, something that if you let it will change how you love others and how you love yourself. That woman who lives alone isn't just not like the rest. She's a living reminder of emotional freedom. Proof you can rebuild without rush, without fear, without performing. She doesn't lead or follow, she carves her own line. And along the way, she lights small fires for others waking up too. If this message landed at the right moment or woke up a part of you you'd forgotten, don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. Tap like, drop your story in the comments. I read everyone, and subscribe for more real talk on self-worth and psychology. If this gave you a little peace today, let it echo in you and through you.